Geert, I was at a customer again, and the customer had this brilliant product. Technically, it was perfect. It worked. There was a brilliant team of developers. Well, the architecture was great. Well, it worked great, but the users started to use it, and the users didn't understand anything about
Hmm.
this thing. So I thought, what is it that brilliant technicians cannot make very good products? Do you recognize that?
I think it's a very common problem, right? If you ask a developer to design something, or he he knows how the product works, right? So he can't relate to how others without that knowledge would use it.
Yeah, so I think maybe we should create an episode on building great UX and why it is important.
Yeah, and how that really ties in into the relationship with developers and, well, the complete engineering culture.
Yeah, well, I saw on Tekorama a great speaker and I invited him, so let's do a podcast.
Let's go.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So we are here with Dean Schuster, and we saw him on Tekorama. He is the owner of TrueMatter, and he is an expert in UX. So welcome, Dean.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Dean, maybe just start with the beginning. Who are you? What are you doing? And why is UX so important to you?
Well, like I said, again, my name is Dean. I am the partner and owner of a company called TrueMatter. We're here in the United States, in South Carolina, and all we do is user experience for complex digital products, sites, apps, software. So all day, every day, we get to work with amazing developers who are producing fantastic, highly functional stuff. And our job is from sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end to make sure that what is being made is going to be received well by users. So that means we're focused heavily on defining user experience, user testing, and really walking side by side with developers as they build amazing things. We've been doing that for, since 2001. So we're a firm that's been around for a while. And over time, as we got experience with dev processes and working with developers, it became sort of natural that we'd want to talk more with development leaders, development teams, because we want dev teams to embrace UX more so that their products are better received, that they are not just functional, but can even be, dare I say it, loved by users. And all that means it actually is something that's successful. So this led me to wanting to talk more to developers that I haven't yet talked to, and that led me to technology conferences in particular. And you saw me at Tekorama in Belgium. And my mission as a professional, as a UX professional, is to help as many developers and dev teams as I can to embrace UX, to understand it better, to bring it into their processes, and to cultivate skill sets, even among developers, not just bringing other people in.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions that triggered me on when you said I want to bring it to developers. Do you think it's a different profession? As like, is it more like bring other people in with the skill UX, or is it more no, people with other skills should also invest more in UX, and it can be done by others as well?
Yeah, I think it's both. Certainly, user experience is a specific skill set, is a specific discipline for sure. Now, it's a young discipline, which means it's been difficult to incorporate into development processes precisely because it's so, relatively speaking, new. And by that, I mean, mid to late 90s kind of new. So it takes time to bring UX roles and UX discipline into dev teams. We're still really working on that quite a lot today. So yes, you have to have those types of roles, and those UX roles, we can get into those things later, but by and large, what I mean by that is at least one person who is designing a product from the get-go with users in mind. And this is the person you can imagine are doing things like wireframing and sketching and researching users and understanding them and seeing how they approach a product or how they approach an idea. Now, I also, though, definitely advocate for developers, architects, BAs, dev leads, product owners. I advocate for them to gain more knowledge and insight in UX. There's lots of good reasons for that. Probably the best reason is that if you want to create better user experience, if you're interested in it, you'll learn more about it. It will help you relate and talk to and collaborate with UX people, but it also kind of gives you a better insight to your own work. And we can get into that a little bit, because a lot of what we focus on is helping dev teams understand that UX isn't a big mystery that is only for these creative people and all of that. No, it's something they can do too.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with this, because in the end, also just developers, maybe back-end developers, they're still building a solution for their customers, right? They're building it for someone. So having an understanding who those people are, what their goal is they're trying to achieve with the software, that's really key, and also making the right decisions on the development level. And
that's
yeah,
right.
having a bit of that notion is really really important there.
Yeah, I would put it this way. Whenever I talk to developers and I mention something like a creative professional being involved in a project, it could be a writer, a microcopy writer. It could be a visual designer. It could be some other content strategist or a general strategist or UX person, just someone who's not a developer. And I often say, how do you feel when you're trying to talk with these people, but they know nothing about what you do? They know nothing about development. They know nothing about data and databases and performance issues and all the things that you care about. How does that feel when they know nothing and they come and they give you these grand ideas that are completely not workable? They violate the laws of development physics. And developers always, they hear that, they deal with this all the time, and they just groan, yes, it's the worst. If they could only just know a little bit about what we're doing and what we're dealing with, we could talk. Well, I tell developers at that point that the opposite is true as well. If you knew just a little, you don't have to become a UX expert. You just need to know a little bit or care about it and be curious about it. If you knew a little bit about the rules of UX or about why interfaces, some are good and some are bad, you would know enough to be able to talk at a great level with any UX person, and they would view it as a wonderful ray of sunshine, just like you would if they cared deeply about databases and approached you with an idea and were concerned about performance. If you approached them with an idea and were concerned about real world use, that means you could talk, you can collaborate, and just two people, a UX professional and a developer who are mutually interested, will create great things together.
So maybe to make it a little bit more clear and concise also for listeners, but like one step back. So what is UX? So maybe
that's a good
because
question.
we actually did not cover that, but there is of course 20,000 definitions all over. So what is UX in your definition? Why is it important?
Well, okay, UX is difficult to define because it's a buzzword now that's thrown around, and it means a lot of different things. But it's actually a very, very simple concept. User experience is simply the experience you have with anything, any product. If you are driving a car, you're having an experience with how you drive and interact with that machine. It used to be called human-computer interaction or human factors or usability engineering. Now we sort of call it UX or user experience, how I interact with technology. It could be anything, but we'll focus on technology. And these days that mostly means the screen in front of us. That's important because real people use the things we make. And if they're not involved in that process and we don't understand them well enough, the chances are we will make something that doesn't make sense to them, that they have trouble with, that they don't understand, that slows them down, that doesn't operate the way they actually work, things of that nature. So UX is about connecting functionality to users in a very real way. And most dev teams today, still in 2024, aren't doing this, which is why, and I will argue, most digital products, sites, apps, software are difficult to use because UX as a discipline is not brought into the process, and certainly UX professionals are not in the mix. That's a very common problem, and you hit it correctly. If we're going to go through all this trouble to make something beautifully functional, we ought to have some confidence that people can use it.
Yeah. And when I talk to developers, they often say, well, UX, that's only making it pretty, right? That's the
Yeah.
that's the vision of
Mhm.
how just a backend developer sees it. Yeah, okay, I can just create a screen and then someone will come in and he will make it pretty, put some design stuff on it,
Yeah.
and then we're ready to go. But that's not what it's really about, right? It's not about, of course, it
Right.
has to look good, but in the end, it needs to work for the the user and the goal he's trying to achieve.
Yeah, looking good or looking nice is a bonus.
Mhm.
What you want is the interaction to be seamless, flawless, fast, efficient, productive. That's what you want. That's usability. That's UX. And certainly that's UX being equated with visuals and design. And even then, designers would argue with that. I can't make something usable just by making it pretty. If it's already architected in such a way that it's not relevant to users and they have trouble with it, it doesn't matter how pretty it is.
Now, and
It's irrelevant.
I can totally relate. I am also doing some voluntary work, and I have to work with a administrative system to put in well the people's data. And every time when I press the back button in my browser, I need to re-log in because
Yep.
I need to press the button in the application to go back and not the back button of my browser. So I have to re-log in like 20 times an hour because the back button just says, "Oh, session is now expired." I'm like, "Come on, this
Yeah,
is
that doesn't
not-
feel very good,
And I
does it?
don't want it to look pretty. I just have to punch in data. So
Yeah.
I can also have a terminal on an AS400 and using the F buttons. But it is really about usability. Like how
Yeah,
do you
that is right.
use the product, right?
You're absolutely correct. People who are using software all day, every day, that's internal software, for instance. It doesn't need to be marketed to anyone.
No.
What you need is for it to be efficient.
Yes.
What you need is to be productive. And that's usability. And most digital products, particularly internal software, because for some reason we don't care as much about usability there, but we lose on efficiency, especially when we modernize applications, and we assume that just by virtue of modernizing them, we've made them better. And chances are no. If you have power users, expert users, they want to be fast and they want to be efficient. And if you get in their way, you have failed. And that's a usability fail.
So would you say, in general, that over the years, the usability of applications actually has gone down? If I look at all these terminal-based applications and I see power users punching in like all these administrative numbers, they were so fast without looking at the screen. They could just tap, fill in
Yeah.
everything, go to the next screen. And now over the years.
Yeah.
All these applications have rebuilt into web applications. Often, no UX person was involved because it's only
Yeah.
internal. You just need to make the screens look similar, and then it will be enough. And I
But
think,
then you have to use your mouse and no tap, and
Right.
F buttons
It's
do
slower.
not work, and it's slow. Yeah.
Yeah.
so in the end, it might lead
Yeah.
into, well, slower application than we had before.
Yeah, I think an argument can be made that when we modernize internal apps, we're at there's a big danger that we can be making things worse, and we do hear that a lot. I don't know if that's industry-wide or if in general things are worse than they used to be. I would say many things are much, much better. But we can't forget what made an application powerfully useful when we modernize. And keyboard access is one of the first problems. You've got to enable a keyboard. And first of all, if you want your application to be accessible to people with disabilities, you've got to enable the keyboard anyway.
Yeah.
So there's lots of great reasons to do that. But that's all that is paying attention to the user. If you paid attention to the user just a little bit, you'd know really fast that it was going to be a problem. For instance, if you had just a sketch or a quick wireframe prototype of what you were thinking to do, power users would have caught some of these problems very, very early before you did any coding.
Yeah.
They would say, if you do it like this, you are going to make my job take a lot longer and be worse.
Yeah.
And all that just happens early in a process. So that's one advantage of a UX approach, is that you can catch things that would damage the usability of your application very early.
So what do you do? So now we have established, well, like, this is UX. We also said this is important. We also know that not all developer teams, or maybe many developer teams, do not incorporate it. So what is the approach? So what can we do? So how would we make this more embraced by our community?
Well, there's a couple of things. First, that's a big reason why I'm out at dev conferences speaking. I want people to learn more about UX, why it's important, all of that. But the next step after you agree that it's important and you want more of this in your company, in your organization, is you need that skill set on your dev team. So that's number one. So you should be looking to find someone, what I'd call a product designer, a UX product designer. You start with one person who cares about the user, who can do the user research and start making prototypes in conjunction with the dev team. That's a minimum, and that's where I would start. The team should grow a little bit from there, depending on the size of the company, but that's how you start. And then secondly, you have to find a place for UX within your development process. That's a little bit harder. Because development processes are made for developers. They solve development problems. We'll just even think of agile as a philosophy and as something that people do every day. In reality, there's no place for UX in any of the training or documentation or anything like that. You've got to figure out how to get UX into agile. That's a little bit harder to do. And because those processes weren't made with UX in mind, no one knows how to do them. So you'd have to have some UX pro that you bring on who's helping you understand and developing that process. There are ways to do this. They're documented, but it requires a dev team to say, we are going to pause, and in our next project, we're going to try to get this integrated. And slowly but surely, you can do it. It won't happen all at once. Those are the two big things. Yeah.
Can you explain a bit about how that process would look, like having such a person in a team? Because I see a lot of companies struggling with this, as you said, with, we're doing Agile and Scrum, so we have a sprint. Do we then do one sprint, we do the UX, and then the stories are ready for development, or does that happen in the same sprint? I see these questions are asked a lot when people are starting with these kind of things.
Yeah, are they part of the definition of done? Are they part of every user story? Are they separate user stories? Like that.
So they have their own sprints.
Really hard. Yeah.
Very tough. Now, we could do a whole workshop on this, so I will try my best to make it relatively short and a principled answer. UX as a thing, figuring out what users want and need, rather, maybe testing with them, sketching with them, iterating to sort of figure things out. These are things that happen early. You can alter your process to say we're going to do some sprints maybe that are just associated with UX research, or maybe some really low fidelity prototyping to try to better understand what we need to make at a very high level, just get us going in the right direction. So that's one bit. But also, once you get to a point where you really want to get into sort of classic, sprints that have very specific, meetings and or ceremonies or cadence, whatever, and you have UX resources in. Basically, the rule is this: UX activities or design-related user activities should be rolling ahead of development activities, even if it's just 1 or 2 sprints ahead, because there's usually things that need to be done. It might be refinement of sketches, it might be better wireframes, it might be design and front-end code that's sort of happening before back-end. That's definitely one thing that once you get rolling, you need to do. But I would definitely prefer to iterate ideas before user stories are written. And you can call those sort of like UX sprints, whatever you want to call them. People call them different things. Because that way, when you're sort of planning your sprints and writing stories, they're informed by UX already. And that one UX person on a team is informing planning, dealing with retrospectives, and that should work relatively well. UX actually is a very iterative kind of discipline. So in theory, it fits nicely in Agile. But there's always this notion of that design and UX is interested in, which is sort of the whole of a bit of software, the context, the global context, and some level of effort on that has to occur before all the pieces will fit in properly. So there's that. It's very difficult from a user perspective or a design perspective to jump into little chunks and then turn it into something good at the end. So that reinforces that idea of some of that UX global thought going into a thing before user stories and before development gets going. That's tough for development teams to accept. It's tough for them to integrate. And all these processes are very different too. Everyone does sort of their iterative or agile process a little bit different. So there's not one perfect way to do it. But the principles I've outlined there are the right ones.
Yeah, I think I can relate with that. So what I was thinking is, you said it's an iterative process, right? Like the development of software as well. So that goes hand in hand. But what I think is a really good thing to do as well is to look at the actual data of how your application is being used, the telemetry and those kind of things, and also use that again to improve your product. How do you have these conversations about what to measure with the development? Because with the development, the developers themselves, because they will probably look at more like operational kind of metrics, times that the page loads, etc. But you might also be interested from a UX perspective, like how long were people on the page before they went to the next page or the next step, and those kind of things. How do you handle that between teams? Because it has to be implemented in the end by the developers as well.
Yeah, well, that when you're thinking about analytics and data, that's where a UX person and a developer will have lots of agreement in terms of what's important. So the more we can learn about behavior with a system, the better. And behavior has to do with many of the things you mentioned. User behavior could be how they're interacting with the product, what they're clicking, when they're clicking, if they're rage clicking and something doesn't work, or how much time they spend. How page load could have an effect on whether a person accesses that page or stays there or does what they need. So what we want to do is combine two things. All the data we could possibly get about performance and performance of a system and behavior of users. That's analytics, that's data, and development teams deeply understand that sort of thing. Combine it with more and better knowledge about users themselves. Users have a certain level of ability, like some of them are novice, some of them are experts, some of them are power users. Some people are new to a system and they don't use it very much, or some people have been in the system forever and use it all the time. Either way, they have things they want to accomplish, things they want to do. They have tasks in mind. They have a workflow. There's a way in which their daily work goes. And they want all the things they use, all the software, all the apps, to parallel their tasks and to parallel their workload. So if we are in agreement with the software we make that we've gotten all our data, we've learned how people behave. We learned what they want to do and need to do. And you have a discussion where both of those things are being talked about. And when that happens, you have a much greater chance at making something that's usable, a much greater chance at making something that people will accept. You modernize something and they're like, wow, this is different and I got to get used to it, but good. So those are the two big things you do together. And that's what a UX person would bring to the table. A different way to think about that.
Is it easy to convince the leaders or the people with the money within the companies to actually start doing this? Because I think, well, if you explain it like this, people, especially maybe the developers or the technical people in the team, think, yeah, well, I'm not really good at it. I understand why we need it, so yeah, let's hire someone. But then there is always the budgets and the money.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you sell this to the leadership of a company, or do you is it not needed to sell? They just say, oh yeah, now you say it, I need to do it.
Yeah, good question. In general, when people talk to us, they already know they have a need for better user experience. That's usually because their apps are being criticized by their users. Yep. They're seeing issues with market share. They're seeing competitors do things differently and get adopted more. And they know they're not sure what the problem is or quite sure how to fix it, but they know it has to do with people disliking using the thing they make. Yeah, that's typically, yeah. So when we're talking with people, we're not doing a lot of convincing because they're already kind of ready. And we've also learned that until you feel that kind of pain, it's difficult to convince you otherwise. So when we first started, it was all about convincing people that UX was important and then they should do it, but not until they felt the pain did they act. So education only goes so far. Like I could educate someone if they want to learn, but if they don't, they don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a common issue that you see in a lot of more traditional companies who never had this this in their products, and maybe they didn't have the competition. But now, with a lot of digital native companies had UX from the get-go, and that's also one of the reasons why they are disrupting those traditional players.
Agree. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So maybe started to round up a bit. Are there any things, resources like books or blogs or websites or conferences that you say, well, this is a good starting point for people that want to know a little bit more about UX and what it can mean?
Well, we live in a golden age of content, and if you want to know anything about UX, including issues like UX and dev processes, you are one search away from many resources out there. So it's the first thing is it's very easy to find out about this. But in terms of a good starting point, if you care deeply about just wanting to understand what UX even is and start to get a sense of it, the first book I ever read was called The Design of Everyday Things. I read this a long time ago, and it really sparked my interest in the subject and helped me to build a career and an understanding of UX. So that's foundational stuff, and there's lots of books like that, but that's one that helped me. Cool. As far as UX in development circles, there are some good resources out there. I'm going to just tell you, we write about this all the time on our site, TrueMatter. It's not like we just write about what it means to bring UX into dev processes. So I would say our blog is a great place just to start. I know that's very self-serving, but our whole purpose is to write about this topic in a way that dev teams can understand.
Yeah, maybe you should write a book.
Right. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Oh, you're
and the book I'm working on is about building UX into development culture, but that's going to take a while for me to put together. But it's going to be about all the things I've learned over time in speaking with dev teams and the difficulties they have embracing this. And you have really hit upon many of the issues, budget being one, right? Is always very tough to take a leap into a new realm that involves some level of upfront budget change. The argument of better UX is that down the line, there's less rework, more acceptance, better efficiency, and those wins are far, far greater than the upfront costs. Especially internally, when you can measure everything like that. Yeah. You can measure how efficient your employees are with interfaces or how productive they are. And when people measure that sort of thing, UX investments seem very small in comparison. And those are some of the ways that we prove to people. But anyway, those are the quick resources that I would suggest.
Great.
Okay.
Well, I think also a nice closure. I really liked your summary on if you start measuring how much it costs in productivity if you do not invest in UX, then it's actually a no-brainer to start doing it. So I think that summarizes nicely this great conversation on UX and what it's about. So thank you very much for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. So, well, that was it for today, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And we will go on to the next episode after this one. We will post all the links in the show notes. Dean, thank you very much, and we will see you on the next podcast.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.